Hello, I'm Kathleen Benoit, host of Living Well in Montana. Living Well in Montana is a program made possible by Living Independently for Today and Tomorrow, LIFT, which is a nonprofit organization headquartered in Billings and serving people with disabilities in an 18-county part of southeastern Montana. My guest today, I'm delighted to have them, is Tanya Thompson, who is, Tanya Thomas, who is the coordinator, the peer coordinator for LIFT, and Bob Snizek, who is a jack of all trades. You have a lot of titles.
Yeah,
Bob, welcome, and we're
yeah.
going to jump into that.
You bet.
But Bob and Tanya are going to be talking about employment considerations for people who live with disabilities. Good topic for all kinds of people, and I'm looking forward to it. So welcome, both of you. I did some research on you, and oh my gosh, you're like a whirlwind.
Yeah.
I mean, you have so many titles. You've done so many wonderful things for people, and I am real curious how you led to this path where you are literally changing people's lives, helping them get a job, retain a job, and live independently.
Well, I've been at it for a little while, and I just, for me personally, as far as how I got into it, it was just a natural extension of trying to do something that matters, and just helping people out, and just respecting the contributions of individuals with disabilities or people without disabilities. Is just kind of honoring people wherever they are and whatever spot they're in, and helping people pursue their dreams. So I think for me, it's like living vicariously through others, because I haven't always been able to, it's not like I wake up every single day saying, woohoo, I'm thrilled about being alive and I do what I love every single second, but it is cool to be able to help somebody pursue their own vocational path and passions, and to become fully invested in whatever that is. I don't need to define that for somebody else. They already know. Right? And so just discovering what that is, and then trying to help them pursue that to a positive conclusion.
How long have you been making that happen for people?
Well, since about 2000, I went to school at MSUB to pursue my master's degree in rehabilitation counseling, and so I started with Core Enterprises back in the day in 1997, and did that then, and so I've been at it for a little while, and so I've always been involved in helping people with disabilities, but not necessarily in pursuing the vocational stuff the entire time. Yep.
I part of the research I did on you was I just Googled your name. You have an unusual, a lovely last name, but it's unusual, and so I was pleased to see that you had received a lot of accolades and a lot of press from different news medias. One of the things that caught my eye, because I'm a grandmother with all these kids, is you started the free safety helmet project. Can you talk about that a little bit with the kids?
And so that was, and I didn't start it, but I was just really invested in helping move it forward while I was working with Headway. And so Headway was part of St. Vincent Healthcare. It's the outpatient program for people that have had traumatic brain injuries or stroke. And so there was a consortium of attorneys that funded the whole project, which was great. And so so they provided the helmets, and then we did a little bit of PR to try to get out the word and give out those helmets every year, and to youth, and just getting people used to using helmets, because heaven knows I didn't do that when I was a kid, and it's a smart thing, and I've certainly seen the benefits of kids wearing helmets, and worked with a lot of people that were saved, whether they're riding a bike or on a motorcycle.
Right, and you do see toddlers and
Yeah.
young children now with helmets.
Yep.
You see them on bikes, you see them on their skis, on
Yeah.
their skateboard, and that's a lot of that is thanks to you because you made it the norm.
Yeah. Tried.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tanya, how did you get involved with Lyft? I want to talk about that because Lyft offers services of all kinds for people living with disabilities.
I actually came to Lyft via a job coach. I was previously working at a job that I was at for a long time and wasn't feeling very fulfilled. And I got together with vocational rehabilitation, and they set me up with a job coach at CORE. And that's how I came to be at Lyft. The job coach thought that the Lyft would be a great opportunity for me not only to gain confidence and gain, empower myself, but to learn about the resources and learn about what services we have here and what we're able to do for people living with disabilities. So,
And how long have you been with Lyft now?
I've been with Lyft 7.5 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Talk about getting a job and retaining a job.
Right, yes.
That is a good success story.
Yes.
And do you mind sharing your disability a little bit?
I am visually impaired. I am partially blind. I have no vision in my right eye and partial in my left. It's an eye disease called retinopathy of prematurity. I was born 3.5 months prematurely, and the retina part of my eyes wasn't fully developed. And so eventually, because that happens, as you age, the retina that you have left, the viable retina, will detach itself through scar tissue. So at some point I could go totally blind, but we're not there yet, and I've been holding for quite a few years. So I just take every day as it is, and we'll deal with anything bad when it comes. So
Yeah, and you're a testament about how having a job, keeping a job, and loving your job certainly increases your quality of life too.
It really does. It's really important to me, especially to contribute to my society, to my community. I feel like I want to help people and I need to contribute, and this job is wonderful for that. It's given me so much insight. It's opened up my eyes to all sorts of cross disabilities. I've learned so much about people, about resources, about everything. It's been wonderful.
Well, I want to quickly remind our viewers also that you are the peer coordination person for Lyft. So you're actually working with people like you that are working to get to a job or
Yes.
to live independently. And so
It's true.
so
Yes.
and you've done a marvelous job.
Thank
She
you.
has very fun virtual holiday parties.
We
Get
try.
a lot of interesting people. So Bob, you've helped countless people. I mean, I don't know if you keep a tally, but can you kind of give me an idea of the tools you need to successfully coach somebody to help them get a job, and more importantly, and to retain it?
As far as the primary tools that I use, more so than just letters after my name, which don't really matter. It's just listening to people and listening with the intent to understand rather than to respond. Years ago there was somebody that came into my office, and this is while I was at the University of Montana in Missoula, and the person happened to use a walker to get around. They were about my age at the time and had a developmental disability, a real enthusiastic young man, and he said that he wanted to be an astronaut. And I was like, okay, well, the question that I asked was, what about being an astronaut is appealing to you? Not, you can't be an astronaut because you're using a walker, or what, I didn't go there. Just what was it about that particular job that appealed to you? And he says, I want to get into a job where I can be respected and where I can wear a uniform. I was like, oh, okay, we can make you an astronaut, if that's how you define it. And so we ended up working with this gentleman and helping him pursue that dream. And they ended up getting a job within a hospital context where wearing uniform was part of it, and a job that he felt like he was being respected. And so that, I think, is the key piece, is just hearing people and hearing their concerns and trying to be responsive to that.
Do you agree with that, Tanya, with the peers that you work with at Lyft, just listening?
It makes, if you meet them where they're at and you meet them on their level, but you challenge them to empower themselves, it helps so much. And I think that's why job coaches are so important, because I think that finding employment is probably terrifying for a lot of people, not just people with disabilities.
Right, with and without disabilities.
And I think job coaches are such great guides in helping you take the steps, helping you find your strengths, helping you to find about things you need to work on, helping you find out things about yourself that can help guide them to get you what you aspire to be. I think they're really important. They're important guides.
You also, on top of all of this work that you've done and been so wonderful with, but you've also established a Montana Employment LLC?
Oh, yeah, so it's a Montana Employment Consultants.
Consultants, okay.
And so it's an agency that I started a few years ago in 2017. So I'd worked with the outpatient brain injury program for 13 years, and we were successfully losing money throughout that time. Unfortunately, and it's one of those things.
I like your honesty.
Yeah, well, and we saw a lot of people, and we saw a good 100 people every year, but it's just one of those types of things where the financial considerations made it such that I was laid off along with a lot of other people at St. V's. And so I was kind of sad about it for about a day, and then I realized, I've always wanted to become self-employed, and I could go to my wife and say, you know what, darn it, I have no choice. I have to go out on my own and start my own business. There's no other options. And so it actually was just a huge blessing that resulted from that. I was able to kind of pursue my own dreams rather than completely live vicariously through others, right? So.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's a way for people to reach out to you. Is that how else do you reach out to people that clearly need a job coach?
Yeah, so good question. So I get my referrals from the state of Montana through vocational rehabilitation. So at Job Service here in Billings, when you walk into Job Service, you've got Job Service on the left-hand side, and then you have vocational rehabilitation on the right-hand side. And so people can apply for services through them. And so they're kind of a broker, resource broker of services. So if an individual needs help with education or needs help in finding employment, they're an excellent resource. And then they provide choice for individuals that come in. And so if you're looking for a job, then they would say, okay, these are the different provider agencies that are out there. Meet with them, decide who you want to work with after you have those conversations. And then we come up with a plan of attack and then start looking for work.
What's the biggest challenge when you are working with somebody who's been living with a disability all of their life, possibly, and there are challenges already in their lives, but what is?
I think that those challenges are as unique to each individual as disability-related impact. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people that struggle with employment, maybe even more so. It's not always the disability label. Sometimes it's maybe attitudinal, or maybe just feeling defeated, or it may be just some of the challenges that person has previously had in looking for work. And then if you go into something believing that it's not going to work, well, guess what? It's probably not going to work, right? And so I think that there are plenty of jobs here in Billings, and then I think it's just the willingness to pursue the dreams that you have, but also be willing to get your foot in the door in that area and then build from there, because you usually don't wind up falling on on top of the mountain right off the bat, especially if it's one of your first jobs.
Interesting.
Right?
That's really interesting.
What, pardon me, Bob, what advice would you give to employers that might be a little apprehensive or maybe have never heard of a service like yours? What advice would you give to potential employers in hiring people with disabilities?
I think I think that not making assumptions would be a big part of it. Like what happens, I think, sometimes is that if somebody happens to have a disability, let's say they happen to have bipolar disorder, okay? And they mention that during the interview process. What would the employer know about bipolar disorder or autism or any number of disability labels? They're going to think about a television show they may have watched, or maybe Uncle Bill that they happen to know that happened to have autism, and so that's maybe the frame of reference, and then the disability becomes defining of everything else about that person. And so I think that for me personally, what I try to do just as an employment consultant is that when an individual goes and interviews with an employer, sometimes I'll come in after the fact and maybe have an honest conversation with the employer about all of the assets that that person might bring to the table that they maybe didn't see, and talk with them about maybe doing a work experience where we pay for that person's salary for a few weeks while they try out a job. That person's under our workers' comp during that time. And so then life decides, right? And then a lot of times employers are surprised after the fact because they all those biases just kind of slip away. And they recognize that, boy, that individual is just doing outstanding for me, and thrilled to death with how things have worked out. So I think that just judging each individual as the unique person that they are, rather than letting the label of a disability define that person.
Go ahead.
No, I think that's great, and I think he's right. I think it's very, we, in this culture that we're in, disability culture, we're about people first, recognizing the person first, and I think Bob's absolutely right. I think that employers, when you disclose a disability, the employers they have one idea, or maybe a very little frame of reference.
Or an assumption.
And I think Bob's absolutely right. Going in to remind employers about the assets and seeing the person as the person first and not the disability. I think it makes all the difference.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I completely agree.
One thing I'd add to that is, like, during an interview, like sometimes when I'm giving suggestions to a person who is going to be doing an interview, is to a lot of times just using a disability label by itself doesn't really have a ton of meaning, and so perhaps if somebody has some strengths or some concerns or some weaknesses that they feel like are needed in order for that employer to make some accommodations on your behalf, is maybe just talk about that, and in terms of, let's say I have some anxiety, and just saying, sometimes when I'm with large groups of people, I get anxious and I don't always feel comfortable, and so I'd really love to work for your business, but maybe in more of a behind the scenes type of capacity. So rather than saying, I have anxiety disorder, doesn't mean anything. Talk about how it might have application to that particular employer, and how and what you bring to the table. And I always show up on time, and I'm a very consistent and quick learner, and everything else that you can build into that, so that maybe the employer can provide some accommodations, but also have the context to be able to, it's like a first date. You usually want to start out on your best foot, rather than talk about some of the stuff in your past or something, right? I mean, at least that's how I think it should work.
Right.
I've been out of the whole game
date.
for a long time, you know what I mean? But that's how I've heard it works, right?
So it must be extremely rewarding to see an employer and an employee blossoming together. It must feel good on your part just to see that work, because it is really hard to convince a lot of business owners that it's difficult to get them on board. The ones I've talked to that have hired a lot of employees who live with disabilities are crazy about them. They can't say enough about them.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm going to ask each of you to give me, do you have just one real success story that you were a part of? Can you just talk a little bit about that person?
Well, I can, because I've been given like a release to be able to do it. But a young man who just started over at St. Vincent Healthcare as a sterile tech, and that was always his particular dream, that he wanted to work within St. V's, and his family had always worked within but actually within the hospital system. And that's what he wanted to do. And so, and St. V's was very open about doing a work experience, kind of like work tryout thing that I had mentioned before, and just to see if they would blossom in that particular position. And they did. I thought that he would. And then he did great, and they actually ended up hiring him. And then this past, I think it was Saturday, was his first day on the job as their employee. And I would expect that that's going to continue for a long time to come.
Oh, that's great. What about you, Tanya? Can you give an example from Lyft and the work you've done with them?
I have one of my peers. Has made great strides in learning to see their capabilities, and they came to us not living independently and not thinking they could. Now they live on their own. They've done some online schooling. They are out pounding the pavement to find a job. They're taking they're trying, and they're taking the no's in stride, and they're keeping moving forward. And I feel like that is such a long way from where they started. And I'm glad to be a part of that.
In some of your peer sessions, which are once a week, do you talk about the frustration, the no's, all the no's that they got? And
we do.
Can they vent there with you?
We do. We have a support group that meets online every Thursday. And we talk about various things. But yes, absolutely. If they're having problems, if they're running into barriers in their daily lives or finding a job or anything like that, they're free to express themselves and talk about their problems, and we all try to come together in round table and offer them ideas and tips, and see if we can come up with something that makes them feel like we get it. For one, we understand, and let's see how we can help you out. Sometimes just talking about it is an amazing help, just for clarity, just for a little peace of mind. It just helps to talk.
And probably you're not alone. I think it helps a lot.
Yes.
Disability or not.
Yes.
It is comforting to be able to share your frustrations with somebody else.
Absolutely, it is.
And get back out there.
Yes.
So if listeners know of someone, or they are someone living with a disability and they want help, how do they reach them with you, Bob? I'll go with.
Well, they're certainly welcome to reach out to me, and my phone number is 647-1507, but also my website, which is mtemployment.net. That's a newer website that I just put together. I've been up and going for like 3 years. I finally said, it's about time.
And you're the
together
CEO.
A website. Yeah, I know. Well, that's the reason why I couldn't get it done. So we have that up and going, and so people can certainly reach me through that website as well. But really, vocational rehabilitation on Rosebud, right next to Job Service, is an excellent neutral place to start. Right, and as far as that resource broker part of things again, and so that's what I would also encourage people to consider.
All right, and what about Lyft, Tanya? If someone wants to learn more about Lyft.
So if they'd like to learn more about Lyft, we offer core services. We advocate. We have information referral services, we do skills training, we do peer support, and we do transitions, whether that be transitioning from youth to adulthood or transitioning from a facility into living into the community. And so we offer a wide variety. If you know you need something but you're not quite sure, give us a call. Our number is 259-5181. That's the main desk. If you're interested in information about the peer program, you can call me directly on my direct line at 690-6324.
I'm not going to ask you what inspires you. That was one of my questions, because clearly everything you do is inspirational. So how can other people, what's advice you can give to people to not give up on jobs?
And I think that I think it is important to follow the things that you're passionate about. And so usually the first two questions that a person asks is, what's your name? Second one is, what do you do? And maybe in Western culture, you know, for better or for worse, that's just the way that it kind of is. And however, if you can't get passion out of the job that you're doing right now, you can pursue and do a lot of good pursuing those passions that you do have, whether it's through a church organization, whether it's through volunteerism, right? And you know, the hobbies that you have, those things all matter, they all count. And so I think that it is important to do a job that you love, but if you can't do that right now, then just do what you love, because I think that kind of feeds into everything that you are. And so, you know, I have, just like everybody else, you know, I've done jobs that I haven't been passionate about for periods of time, and just kind of cleaned up that meat department or whatever I did to get through college, because I knew what the end goal was. I was willing to go through the gunk, literally in that case, to get through and to do something that I loved and was passionate about. Yeah.
Tanya, what advice do you give?
I try to make sure that people know that they're not alone, that many of us can identify with what they have going on. The important thing I try to do is have them realize that barriers don't have to stop them. They might have to remap their journey. They might have to find another way, but barriers don't have to stop them.
Thank you. You guys are great. I am sorry to say that our time is up. I can't thank you enough. Bob Snizek, who's a job coach and all-around good guy, getting jobs for people that really want jobs and will work. Tanya Thomas is with Lyft as a peer coordinator. I can't thank you enough. I'm Kathleen Benoit. This is Living Well in Montana, and I hope you will join us again.